Welcome, everyone. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Charis Circle. Charis Circle is the nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books, and Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. I'm here tonight to celebrate a book that is really, as relevant as it was when we first planned this event way back in March. It's called Fury, and you may, after watching town halls last night, be sitting with your fury, dwelling in your fury. I know I am, and we're here to talk about women's experiences under Trump, in the Trump administration, in the Trump age, and one of the things that we've experienced at Charis is sort of a mass awakening of a lot of people who were formerly sort of apolitical or lightly political, who have come of age politically since Trump's election. And then the flip side of that has been a lot of folks who were very engaged with politics throughout the course of their lives have doubled down, gotten even more involved, made new friends, found new causes, new ways of being in community with people. And so at Charis, we even experienced something that we jokingly called the Trump bump, which was that all of a sudden people wanted to read books about politics again. They wanted to read, anti-racist books. They wanted to learn more about feminism. And so the flip side of living through this very horrific time for us has been this deep engagement with white people engaging in anti-racist work, people learning about immigration laws, people learning about the criminal justice system. And so we really see it as, the flip side of this very hard and scary time. So as we move into election week in the next 2 weeks, we really were excited to host this event. And we asked our favorite local writer and moderator, Jessica Handler, to help shape this event tonight with us. So she stepped in on the fly to help us kind of do this. And so thank you, Jessica, for doing this. We always love it when you get to kind of run your glorious mouth, because I know you like to do that.
I do.
And and be in conversation with some great folks. So I'm going to let you take it away. And I want to let folks know, if you have not yet purchased Fury, there's a green button at the bottom of your screen. You can click that at any time, and that will send it right out to you. The other thing is you can introduce yourself in the chat, say where you're watching from if you like. And at the bottom center of the screen, there's that Ask a Question button. Anytime anytime at all, you can ask a question there. So I see somebody saying that they can't hear. You may need, I'll deal with that in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jessica. Thank y'all so much for being here.
Thank you, ER. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's funny when somebody says someone's on the fly now, the first thing I think of is I am not the fly on Mike Pence's head. I am not. I want to thank y'all for being here. And I want to thank Charis Books and more. And I'm really glad to be talking about this. I want to tell you that Trump's election and subsequent damage to the United States woke up a lot of white women. Women of color tended to know already what some white women learned late. And Donald Trump is an affront to the entire feminine ethos of caring. He is the ultimate self-aggrandizing, toxic man who will always act in his own interest. This is his pathology. I'm quoting here from some of the material surrounding Fury, the book. And by extension, he's a public health danger to women. The three of us here tonight, the table of contents, the contributors to Fury, are a very diverse group of women from across the country. And the three of us here tonight are going to talk about our experience and our essays. Women's lived experiences during the Trump era, Fury, brings together a community of women who reveal the impact that the current occupant of the White House's behavior, words, and presidency has had on each of them, and how we're confronting the problem and how we're trying to fight back. Our hope is that the essays in this book help the reader feel less alone, work through some of their own hurt and pain, and formulate a plan for what they can do to help bring about an end to the Trump presidency. I want to say the first thing is please vote. And the second thing is, let's talk about Fury. The people here tonight we have got Dr. Carrie Neville, and we have got Marianne Leone. So let's start with, I'm going to ask Dr. Neville, Carrie, to read from her material and talk about it, and then we'll go I guess I'll do some and then we'll wrap it up with Marianne. And I'm going to ask each of us to read about it and talk about why we wrote it and what it means to us. So let me introduce you to Carrie. Dr. Carrie Neville is the coordinator of the MFA and undergraduate creative writing program at Georgia College and State University, where she's also an assistant professor. She's the author of Remember to Forget Me and Necessary Lies. Her fiction and essays appear in many journals and have been named notables in the Best American series. She's the recipient of the Dallas Museum of Art's Fiction Prize and the Texas Institute of Letters Prize for the short story. She was a 2018 Fulbright Fellow in Ireland, where she was visiting faculty in creative writing at University of Limerick, and she continues to teach for the University of Limerick Frank McCourt Summer Writing School. So, Carrie, take it away.
Sure, yeah, thank you all for inviting me. Is there feedback?
I'm good.
You're good? Okay, sorry. Thank you all for inviting me and for coming and listening to our stories. I'm going to read, my essay is pretty short. It's actually only 3 pages, so I may be able to get in under our 5-minute sort of suggested limit. And it's called Hope After Trump. And I guess if you're, depending on which town hall you watched last night, you might have felt furious or you might have felt hopeful. And if you went back and forth between the two, you might have been on the seesaw. Hope After Trump. And I wrote this literally a couple of weeks after the Trump election. I still say that with
yeah.
Hope After Trump. 5 years ago, I sat across from my outpatient psychiatrist, an impassive, impersonal diagnostic dictator. Between us, on his desk, sat a thick stack of my files, a monolithic, supposedly definitive summary of my case history. Anorexic, alcoholic, self-injuring chronic patient with escalating bipolar disorder, hospitalized more than 20 times, with long stints in inpatient programs, meant to save me from myself. His finger tapped the keyboard and his eyes scanned the computer screen. "There's nothing more I can do for you. You're a hopeless case," he said. This was not the first time I'd been told this. My frustrated therapist of 10 years had frequently pronounced, "You are the most hopeless patient I have ever worked with." Hopeless, not as in he believed that I was hopeless and would eventually die by suicide, unethical then to take my cash, but that I believed myself to be hopeless and destined to die by suicide. He said this in kindness, with both concern and intimate knowledge, and he was right. Truly, I believed this. I'd attempted suicide several times over the years, sometimes half-heartedly, jumping into a frozen lake while drunk in the middle of campus, cutting my arms, and sometimes with full intent, 17 shots of vodka in 15 minutes and waking in the ICU with a blood alcohol level of 0.39, overdosing on my meds, and waking in the ICU in 4-point restraints, and the slow, deliberate death by starvation. Always, I returned to the world with regret rather than gratitude. Hopelessness, contrary to common understanding, is characterized not by passive inertia, but by agitated despair. You work toward your own annihilation, though it is based not in nihilism, but rather in the persistent agony of wanting to hope again, but daring not. The novelist George Eliot once wrote, quote, "What we call our despair is often only the eagerness of unfed hope." How does one live between expectation and decimation over and over and over again? Despair convinces us not to dare anymore, but to yield to bleak desperation. And for me, it becomes easier, really, to cut myself and my ties with the world. And so I set out to wreck myself. Why hope when I had unremitting, unrelenting mental illness, careening between mania and depression? Hopelessness cut into my arms again and again, scars upon scars. "This is your end," they said to me each day, as I stood in the shower looking at the cross-hatchings, as I hid them under long sleeves, concealing my hopelessness and suicidal determination, like you might a secret, wildly passionate love affair. My pain, my pain, my pain, my despair, my despair, my despair, mine, 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 not yours to see. But that afternoon, sitting across from my psychiatrist, who was so sure that I was going to kill myself, maybe not that day or that week or that year, So sure that I was no longer worth believing in, no longer worth imagining a future for, I pushed back my sleeves and for the first time looked with self-compassion at the scars on my arms. Examining the angry red wheels, I understood that all of it, the starvation, the drinking, the cutting, the suicide attempts, were only my failed effort to deny hope's tenuous hold on me and its wobbly promise. Maybe, but only maybe. Can you live with that? Despair as the eagerness of unfed hope? Threaded through my bruised and battered and frayed heart was the hope that maybe wanting, desiring, moving, acting, speaking, writing, loving again was worth the battering. That despair did not mean I had to die, but in fact, the reverse. I had to keep living, hoping for moments of joy and purpose, which, while ephemeral, offered ecstatic flight. Emily Dickinson instructs, quote, "Hope is a thing with feathers. We are fragile but capable of aeronautical miracles. Hope is tied to Edmund Burke's understanding of a moral imagination. We must embrace the duties and ethical obligations of endurance because we are sacramentally connected to each other. Hopelessness severs connection, forces us into retreat. I have no hope for the world, or have no hope for us, or have no hope for myself, and therefore I can retreat, take my leave. To believe that I must stay alive and endure and continue to hope and act, yes, here is the crux, to act on these hopes again and again, despite dashed hopes, is to strengthen my holy connection to you, by which I am obliged to secure my future to yours and yours to mine. Hope restores us to each other. Hope asks us to live in truth with each other. Hope asks us to entangle our lives over and over in joy and in pain, in promise and in disappointment with each other. Hope is no superficial undertaking, but demands absolute allegiance, even in apocalyptic times, times like these, when so many of us feel hopeless, despairing of this unjust and intolerant regime, marching across a country founded in the hope of who we can be together, a just, tolerant, and democratic we the people. Hope demands allegiance, even when the psychiatrist who has defined your future sits so smug in his surety that he well knows your end. This is when we must gather up the threads in our hearts, regardless of any final, though always premature, diagnoses. Because that psychiatrist didn't know shit about me and my heart. I looked down at my arms and then back at him. "Fuck you," I said, and walked out. I never cut myself again, never hid my scars again, and never believed that I should die again. Well, not for any sustained length of bleak time. My sleeves pushed back now say, "Look at me, world. The record of scars of my despair is not my end, but my beginning, reminding me to risk flight, reminding me of my social contract, my sacramental connection to you in this world. If I risk flight, you might too. Gravity is a force that draws two objects together, my body and the earth, me to you. Some birds fall into flight, leaping from branches and cliffs to what must seem sure death, and yet wings and feathers." As Burke wrote, the moral imagination necessary for enduring the chaos of despair is, quote, "what the heart owns and understands, understanding ratifies. We cannot be parsimonious, miserly in our hope, but must risk lavish flight together."
Thank you so much. So can you tell us a little bit, just tell us one thing, if you would, about what was revelatory for you in writing this essay and how it connects to the theme of the collection?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the ways that we, especially with fury and anger, right? I mean, we can often sink into inaction because we're so angry and so furious, and we feel like nothing we do is going to shift anything out in the world. And that might be true, right? I mean, that can feel really true for a long time. And sort of just thinking about, I was somebody who everybody said was supposed to be dead, and it was just really making that decision that, no, I'm going to stick to it. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to stick it out, and I'm going to keep pushing forward. And that's precisely what I've been trying to do the past 4 years. Yeah. Under this president.
Yeah. And very much what we're all trying to do these
Yeah.
next 19, 20 days, however much it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to read a very little bit from my essay, like 2 pages, and then I will answer my own question, and then I'll take it over to Marianne, and then we've got some sort of general questions because I'd like to have a discussion, and also I definitely want to hear from. We all want to hear from folks who have is tuned in even the term anymore. I don't know. I don't have a. I mean, I do have a bio, but I forgot to give it to somebody to introduce me, so. I'll just wing it. I'm Jessica Handler, author of The Magnetic Girl, winner of the 2020 Southern Book Prize, author of the memoir Invisible Sisters, and the craft guide Braving the Fire, a guide to writing about grief and loss, which is kind of my specialty is trauma writing. So here we go. This is called Smoke. The first one comes in crying, not merely crying, but weeping, red-eyed, shaken. Dramatic, yes, but this kid's 19 years old, maybe 18, and if they're registered to vote, this is their first election. The next kid into my classroom slams his books on the table, an unusual act for this soft-spoken, contemplative student. Clearly, we need to talk, and not just about our classwork. We're reading Crito, Plato's depiction of Socrates' argument for, among other things, whether it's right to do wrong when you're wronged. 3 mornings a week, all semester, my college freshmen and I have been trying to pry open our understanding of what's right and who, at least through the lens of classic literature, gets to say so. On the first day of the semester, I tell them, history is written by the winners. This statement rattled me when I was their age, and it never fails to disturb smart college students, which is, of course, the idea. What's right and who gets to say so shudders before me in the face of the weeping girl, the silent, thoughtful boy, and the anxious kid who guardedly asks what I mean when I say we will put our class plan aside for a while today to talk about the election, quote, without hate speech, without rhetoric, close quote. I tell him I don't want to hear any bumper sticker slogans. He relaxes. Forest fires have been burning for days here in Georgia. Overnight, the smoke has drifted southward. The stink permeates our campus. The metaphor doesn't escape me, but I'm too tired or too burned out, I would say, if I had the energy to create a jokey metaphor for my students. I'm operating on less than 3 hours of fitful sleep. I'm wearing what I wore yesterday, first to a bar with friends, to the returns, then in my living room, then discarded at my bedside, now worn again because I cannot think. This isn't happening, I said to my husband beside me in bed watching the returns. Florida will turn it, I said, unable to sleep, but Florida did not. Neither did Pennsylvania, where in 1948 my grandparents hosted the poet Langston Hughes in their home, where during a college summer in 1978 I waitressed in a resort in the Poconos serving meals to the retired rank and file, the laborers of the International Ladies Garment Workers Union. I must have slept, because I woke to the radio announcer telling me that Vladimir Putin had sent a congratulatory telegram to President-elect Trump. The snooze button was too far away, and I heard the whole terrible phrase, President-elect Trump. This isn't happening, I said to my husband. But it is, he said, and held me close. Not 2 weeks earlier, we had left a friend's house, disbelieving the not very veiled anti-Semitic remarks directed toward us by her boyfriend. She, long one of my dearest friends, he, until that moment, unremarkable. We are Jews, and we are afraid of what may happen under Trump, I said, over a glass of wine, referring to a yard sign down their street. Minorities, the boyfriend advised us, would do well to prove to those they believe would oppress them that they are well-meaning and present no harm. I'm still mad. Do you know, my husband asked, the story of the good German? The boyfriend inquired if we wanted to be responsible for a civil war. Ill at ease, we tried to alight on other topics, a mutual friend's health, an upcoming art show, but our friendship crumbled at that table. Sickened by the boyfriend's attempt to shame us and my friend's apparent disinclination to intervene, I have chosen not to speak to her again. On this post-election morning, I fear how her boyfriend voted. I fear that she chose not to vote at all. In my classroom, I'm hearing audio, I love it. In my classroom, I open my briefcase and extract what my students expect, a copy of The Last Days of Socrates, my markers, a pen, a pad. I pass around the sign-in sheet, a page torn from the pad, on which I have written today's date, November 9, 2016. In one of my other classes, a student always writes a funny message for me beside her name, and I wonder if she will today. We're going to talk this morning about how you feel, I say, wishing for more muscular words at my disposal than talk or feel. How many of you are first-time voters, I ask. Almost all the hands go up. Did the others not vote, I wonder? Are they under 18 or perhaps misunderstood my question? I don't press it. A student tells me about the Harambee Factor, the idea that some voters chose to write on their ballots the name of the mountain gorilla shot to death when he apparently attempted to save a child who had fallen into his enclosure at the Cincinnati Zoo. One kid thinks it's funny, but the majority is repulsed. What does it say about our society that we think so little of ourselves that we'd waste a vote on a dead gorilla, asks a reliably penetrating thinker in the front row. That we don't believe we have a voice that can be heard, that voting is a bottomless pit into which we throw our beliefs because we don't think they will be acknowledged, that the winning candidate had it all worked out from the beginning. So just screw it and vote for a dead gorilla, I ask, unnerved. That didn't happen, a student interjects, but it might as well have. So I'll stop there. It goes on a little bit more. Why did I write this? I wrote it because, thank you. I wrote it because I grew up in a very politically active family. And you can gather that a little bit from the Langston Hughes reference. And I mean, voting for me was when I got to vote at 18 and then again at 21 because the law changed. But when I got to vote, it was thrilling. And it's been terribly important to me my whole life. And as a college professor who spends part of my time with first-year students, it's very, very important to me that they feel, kids who are of age and are citizens, that they feel that their vote matters. And even if a kid isn't of age or isn't a citizen, they can have opinions, they can work on a campaign, they can do all kinds of things. So I feel it's part of my mission in life to let them know that it has to matter. And that's why I wrote this. And that's why I've been leaning on them all semester. So that's what I have to say about that. And let's see, how about Marianne? Hi.
Hello.
Hello. Marianne Leone is an actress, screenwriter, and essayist. Her essays have appeared in the Boston Globe, Post Road, Bark Magazine, Coastal Living, Solstice, and WBUR's Cognoscenti blog. She is the author of 2 terrific memoirs, Jessie from Simon & Schuster and Ma Speaks Up from Beacon Press. She had a recurring role on HBO's The Sopranos as Joan Moltisanti, Christopher's mother. If I pronounced it wrong, call me out. She has also appeared in films by David O. Russell, Larry David, John Sayles, and Martin Scorsese. Jessie is published in Italy by Nutrimenti.
That's right.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I am a rageaholic, and the last 4 years have done it for me. Actually, even before the election, when we had a son, our late son had quadriplegia. He was nonverbal. He had cerebral palsy. He was a poet. He was a straight A student. He was a Latin scholar. And I became radicalized. I was already politically active, but I became radicalized when the town we moved to, which is the town we live in now, would not allow him to have his basic civil right to a free and appropriate public education. So when I saw Trump mocking the reporter who held his hands the way my son did, I wrote an essay that was in the Globe that you can still access. It's called Donald Trump Doesn't Have a Clue About My Son. But so when I was asked to write for Fury, I was happy to. But I thought I'd write about my mother, who was an immigrant, who came here at the age of 18 to escape fascism, which now seems kind of, since we're teetering on the brink. Anyway, here's my little essay about that. It's called What My Immigrant Mother Would Say About President Trump. Even saying president. I hate bullies, but bullies and their jeering wingmen are becoming an everyday part of the American landscape. Whenever I go on social media or turn on my television, I feel like I'm that bespectacled little kid from A Christmas Story being taunted by a yellow-toothed bully in a raccoon hat. Bullies have always been admired and elevated in a fascist state. In The Bicycle Runner, a memoir of love, loyalty, and the Italian resistance, Gianfranco Romagnoli chronicles his life in 1930s Italy and writes, "To conform to the official mold, a fascist boy had to be strong, courageous, a smart aleck, and a bully." In Romagnoli's world at that time, quote, "Many were under the thumb of a few, the few unscrupulous, violent men who were in power. Their purpose, more than to convert, was to intimidate and humiliate." My mother left Italy in the 1930s to escape fascism in an arranged marriage to an old man who offered a dowry of adjoining land to her father's farm. As a child, she marched for Il Duce in a balilla uniform, holding a baby doll, a symbol of the regime's restriction of women to the role of breeders for the fascist state. My mother never talked about what it felt like growing up under a strutting dictator. Newsreels of Benito Mussolini look cartoonish today, his oversized chin jutting like the prow of a destroyer as he parodies a manly posture, dressed in military falderall, betasseled as a showgirl, barking out his demands to believe, obey, fight. Within days of her arrival to the United States and with only a few words, I just lost my place here. With only a few words of English, help me, sorry. My mother was soon sewing alongside other immigrants in Boston's garment district, women who spoke a different language and who gave her a different name, one that made my mother's otherness feel irreversible. But she was safe from an arranged marriage to an old man in the war that would devastate her homeland. My mother met and married my father and found love, too. They had a family, and she cooked for his working-class bar, Leone's Cafe, until his untimely death at 50, leaving her widowed at 43, with 3 kids, no marketable skills outside of cooking, and a tenuous grasp of the English language. But Ma persevered in this country. It was her home, this place 7 miles outside Boston, where her Italian-American neighbors all immigrated from the same town in southern Italy. In her later years, she lived with my sister and her family in the same house, surrounded by her grandchildren, the bullies in her life, a distant memory. My first experience with bullies was with my nun teachers, who were masters in the art of humiliation. First graders who talked in class were paraded from room to room wearing baby hats to be ridiculed by their classmates. Our bruises were invisible in view of actual thuggery, but the fear was pervasive, and kids routinely peed their pants, ramping up the humiliation into a hellscape that seemed as eternal as the one we were threatened with every single day. In my adult life, there was a special education director bully who decreed that my quadriplegic son couldn't have his basic civil rights to a free and inclusive public education. But that guy's not the special ed director anymore. And my son, Jesse, became a straight A student and a bully slayer by default. This past November, I watched a video of a young man bullying cowed women on a plane, shouting the name of the winner of our recent presidential election as a threat to silence them. The women sat, heads bowed as if at a ritual shaming ceremony, and said nothing. I wondered if I would be silent too if I were on that plane. I remembered all the times I sat like a stone in first grade, disappearing into my seat, feeling powerless yet complicit as I watched my classmates groveling, dissolving into tears of shame as they were paraded before us like Chinese dissenters during the Communist Revolution. I was glad I wasn't the one being punished, but by doing nothing, I felt like I had somehow become the bully's accomplice. I don't want to live in a place where bullies are elevated to the status of gods, but that has already happened. I wonder if my mother, who died 12 years ago, would recognize her adopted country today. Of one thing I am certain, my mother could recognize a bully, and when she felt compassion for people new to this country, as she once was. When our Italian-American neighbor of 50 years sold her house and 3 generations of a Muslim Pakistani family moved in, my mother was glad of a playmate the same age as her granddaughter and sympathetic to the little girl's older brother who came to her with his problems. I know what it's like, Ma said, to feel alone. We don't know nobody. She plied the kids next door with food and lied about her meatballs. What pork? There's no pork in there. Ma could be about a bit of a bully about food or something. What would Ma think of the bully in chief? A memory flood of her slushy dialect fills my ears. Most of the words are unprintable, but the loudest is gavone, the dialect version of cafone. The word has nothing at all to do with power or strength or humanity. Gavone describes a boor, a rude, lumbering beast who would knock over a small child or a grandmother to get to the food and then grunt inarticulately as he swallows everyone else's portion. And in fact, our president did that just recently for all the world to see as he shoved aside the prime minister of Montenegro, Dusko Markovic, to get to the front for a photo op, a move that was the definition of gavone. Ma may have struggled with the English language, but that doesn't mean she wasn't smart. She knew how to parse her bully boys, even in dialect. And she knew a gavone when she saw one.
That is so good. That is so good.
You.
So tell me something, what was revelatory for you in writing this piece? Anything revelatory?
I thought about the fact that our country, the country my mother immigrated from, was once a shithole country, and that our president had just deemed that a lot of countries were shithole countries, and that Italian immigrants 100 years ago were not considered white, and that when my mother came, she probably encountered some of that. And that's, instead of making her hard, it made her completely compassionate to other people who are immigrants, and that I really admire that in her. And it was something she taught me, and it was something I learned to emulate. So I'm glad of that.
Yeah. These are so interesting, such interesting pieces. And the whole book is really terrific because, as with all good essays and all good creative nonfiction, our experiences are different, but fundamentally they're the same, right? They're fundamentally common in terms of our goal or what we're trying to get across. So I have some questions for us, but before I do that, I want to know if there are any questions. Are there any questions coming in from our the people on the other side of the Crowdcast screen? I don't know. I think I could probably, not yet. Okay, I'm reading I've gotten really good at like sort of reading my peripheral vision and doing all these things. It's like a new skill. So here's some questions for both of you, for Marianne and Carrie. According to the Pew Research Center, 47% of white women voted for Trump. And like a good professor, I have a citation for this. Living in the world right now, how do we reckon with this number? If we, the three of us here don't create common cause, who will, right? Who is it who's going to reach out? Particularly since Trump's campaign, I'd rather say the current occupant of the White House, actually, particularly since the current occupant of the White House is trying hard to appeal to suburban white women of a certain age.
Right.
What do we do to make change there, since it's kind of us, or in broad strokes, it's us?
I don't know. What horrified me the most was how many women were in the last election were offended by Hillary in some way. And, and having been, my mentor when I was fighting the school was Mary Somoza, a woman who lived below the poverty line in New York City with twins with cerebral palsy, 2 wheelchairs, 2 flights of stairs. And she taught me, Hillary and Bill did everything to help them with her kids, because Bill Clinton had a town hall meeting when he was first elected, and one of her daughters, the verbal one, went because they knew she was already a rabble-rouser, the mother. And the daughter said, they asked who had questions, and the daughter raised her hand and said, I want to know why my sister can't go to school with me. And Bill Clinton said, well, what do you mean? She said, well, she can't talk. So she uses a computer, and I want to know why she can't go to school. Now, she was 6 at the time, right?
Oh my gosh. I was imagining like a 14-year-old.
No. She was amazing, this little girl. And she's followed in the footsteps of her mom. Anyway, as it turned out, they were swarmed by the press when they got home. Little Anastasia was answering questions in Spanish and English. And the important thing is that Hillary and Bill never forgot them, and that he handed them their diplomas when they graduated, and that she led the Pledge of Allegiance when his library opened. And that Hillary, who didn't even know us, knew that we were advocates and that we fought for disability and wrote to us when we lost our son.
Wow.
That kind of caring and that kind of follow through. I talked to women I knew about that, women who I didn't know anybody who was on the fence at the time, but I would have brought that story to them if I could have, you know.
What do you think, Carrie? Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think, you know, one of the things that, I mean, I grew up in suburban Long Island, right? I'm from that audience, white suburban Long Island, I should say. And I'm part of that, where I grew up in that, you know, audience that Trump is targeting. You know, I'm here to save suburbia, as if it's under threat. I mean, there's no threat to suburbia. You might think there is, if you're trying so hard to hold on closely to what you have and you believe there's not enough to go around, right? Then you might believe things are under threat. And I think, you know, a lot of white women, particularly, you know, suburban. I mean, what is suburban? I don't even know what suburban is anymore. It's you know, I think a lot of suburban white women feel like they need to kind of clamp down and protect, you know, sort of circle around and close things in, not lose what they've gained. And I think it just requires this larger shift in thinking, like there's enough, right?
Yeah.
There's enough for all of us to be part of this democratic experiment. There's enough resources, you know, to go around, and we don't have to hoard them and just keep them from our own. And you know, and
Don't
part
you
of
think it's fear? It's fear of the other, though. It's always fear of the other. It's what you don't know, right? I mean, we experience this with disability, and I think it's true with race too, right? I mean,
and so what I'm hearing from both of y'all, and I agree with this, is the way to create outreach. And I'm not a strong enough person to do this. I had a dream the other night that there was somebody I didn't know in my house having dinner with us, and they started saying pro-Trump things, and I got up and I took their plate away and put it in the kitchen and told them to leave my house. So I clearly do not have what I'm about to espouse, but empathy, you know, the current occupant of the White House doesn't have it, but what's happening in all of these essays here, you know, in Fury, is an element of empathy. And Marianne, what you're talking about with the Clintons and with Anastasia and her sister and her mother, and what you're talking about, Carrie, with, you know, what is a suburb and what is it, you know, if we say women are trying to circle the wagons and protect, that's empathy. That's like, I want things to be good. I want things to be good for mine and yours.
I think that sometimes the women who are for Trump think they're getting reflected power and glory from powerful white men, you know, and they don't understand that that's not how it works. You're like a trophy or something to them. You're not your own person that way. And what you say about empathy is very true. And, you know, that relates to the arts too. There's a whole reason why, I mean, the extreme right is always whining that they can't get, you know, people from quote unquote Hollywood because, dude, empathy is responsible for creating art.
Right.
If you don't have empathy, you don't have art.
You don't have good art, right?
That's right.
So
or have Kid Rock, you know.
And Ted Nugent.
Yeah. God bio. Yeah.
Well, and I think too, like, you know, going back to like Hillary Clinton, and, you know, in the sort of latter months of her campaign, I remember, you know, the current occupant of the White House calling her, like, very vocally, like, hysterical, and hearkening back to, like, you know, that sort of label that we give to women who are angry and visibly angry and are loud and powerful, that somehow there's something out of control about them. And that can be a little terrifying to women who are not used to having a powerful voice.
Yeah.
Right.
And look at the tightrope Kamala's having to walk. Yeah. She's already being called a monster.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean.
Well, consider who's calling her that. But I wonder, too, if it's generational. And, you know, I don't have a 20-year-old here to ask them. But I wonder if it's generational, if there's a particular point where some women who are my age or older who may feel that power is a new / dangerous / scary thing, and maybe we shouldn't have it. I don't know. I'm just.
I don't know. I'm really old, but I remember like marching in the streets and saying, "Keep your rosaries off my ovaries,"
and,
you know, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, George, get out of my bush. I was at that march.
Oh my gosh. How did I miss both of these? The phrases alone are fantastic. That's great. So let me ask you this. I've got a question directed to each of you for your own work. Carrie, you write in your essay about lavish flight, which is such a beautiful phrase. And I'm wondering, how do we in these last 2.5 weeks or whatever, and perhaps more,
Oh, don't.
I know. I just have to, Kinahara.
Landslide.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But Kinahara, how do we undertake lavish flight in these moments?
I think you got to go. I mean, all right. I wasn't expecting this question. Put on my wing.
And
right?
don't worry. I'm not going to hold you to it. Nobody's going to get back to you. It's like you said.
No. I mean, I think, part of it is like summoning up that sort of inner, and I'm not really a fan even of that term resiliency. I think it's a kind of term of privilege. A lot of people suffer and it's really hard and they may not be resilient, and somehow that we fault that in our culture, right?
Right.
Elevate or fetishize resiliency. But I think, in these hopefully last weeks of the push, it's very easy to wake up exhausted. Like this whole week, I've just wanted to turn off my screen, check out, I'm teaching online. I don't have anything. I feel like I don't have anything left to give anymore, but I do, right? I have more to give. And,
I just feel,
yeah, no, go ahead.
Everybody can give from their own place, right? Yeah. It's like, you're probably giving to your students incredibly, right, Carrie?
Students, yeah, and also just I live in a kind of a suburban neighborhood in Middle Georgia, if you can even call that a suburban neighborhood. But it's a fairly, compared to my suburb in New York, a fairly integrated neighborhood, and many Black families, many Southeast Asian families. It's a very mixed neighborhood. But I noticed there was a lot of Trump signs on a few blocks, like big flags, right? Really? And very few Biden signs. And we have a very active African-American sort of political community here. And I was just like, where are the signs? Where are the signs? And I was like, you know what? I need to be the person to put all the signs out, because maybe in some way, it's a little safer for me in this neighborhood, right? As a kind of my privilege as this white woman who teaches at the university, I can take it putting those signs out in my front yard. And so I stacked 10 Biden signs, and my local state house person who's running Quentin Howell signs out there in the front yard. And enthusiasm, right?
Have they been taken down? Has anybody taken your signs down?
They have not taken them down.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. And then Marianne, I'm springing these questions on y'all. I sort of emailed them to you before, but I'm evil that way. I know from longstanding talking with you about bullies and about how fierce and righteous you can be. And we were having this conversation through our fingers earlier today. What would you tell your mother? What would you tell Ma right lately, now, today, about where we stand now, this minute? What would you tell her? Is it going to get better, do you think? Or is it going to go to resilience, to use an overused word? What would you tell your mom?
I'm into spreading the word and fighting at this point. I really feel like, yeah, Ma, this is like it was when Mussolini was ascending to power and women's rights were stripped away. I mean, she was a young girl when that happened, so I'm sure she wasn't aware. She was a young girl living on a garlic farm. I mean, what did she know at that point?
Well, with the baby hat and the doll, yeah.
With the babies, yeah. But what was really happening was that immediately the Catholic Church linked with the fascists, and they started stripping away rights from women. And that's happening now. Yeah. That exact thing is happening now. Yeah. So it's a repeat, and you have to do. I say each person to their own skill set. Do what is what you're good at. Mm-hmm. If you're good at schmoozing people, then that's your skill set. If you're good at making phone calls, I am not. I'm good at writing, ranting op-eds, but I'm not good at. I'm like you. I don't think I'd be great at. Please, I haven't spoken to my husband's family for 4 years because they voted for Trump.
Oh my goodness! Oh,
and they're
Maybe they were the people in my dream and I took their dinner plate away and put it in the sink and opened the door and told them they had to leave my house.
Yeah. Well, I feel like if you knew my son and you came to his service, but you still vote for somebody who mocked him, dead to me.
Yeah.
You know, that's it.
I agree
nobody
with
does
you.
morta me like the Italians.
I agree with
the
you
Jews.
about the I agree with you about the idea that everybody to their own skill set. And I've been thinking a lot about how activism also requires self-care, which means as exhausted as we are and frightened, we do the best we can. And as writers, we spread the word through, in your case, and through others. Carrie and you and I, in our case, I would assume in the classroom as well as in the writing that we do. There's more to do than just social media, obviously. But activism also requires self-care, which is sometimes cutting off the social media for a day and just saying, I'm gonna go play music, or I'm gonna cook, or I'm gonna walk around the block, and then you come back and you're more energized. And
I got a heavy bag that I hung in my garage that I just punch.
Oh, really?
Very effective.
Very effective.
I had a punching bag when I was fighting for Jesse's schooling. I put one in the basement. Yeah, that was very helpful.
You can imagine people's faces on the punching bag, and right now it's like one face.
Right. It's kind of like in the Dick Van Dyke Show with the dartboard, right? Didn't they have? I can't remember. My brain just checked out. I have a drum kit, so I play drums. So that's what I do.
Oh, beautiful! That's great.
So let's see. We have a question here. Let's see. We got a question. Rebecca Solnit has drawn the distinction between optimism and hope. Hope isn't Pollyanna-ish. It actually requires an awareness of reality. Yeah, it does. I heard some of that in your essay, Carrie. How do each of you balance your sense of pragmatism and hope? Lovely question, and I think it's a reference to Solnit's book, Hope in the Dark. So let me try and shut down that little screen. So Carrie and then Marianne, how do each of you balance pragmatism and hope?
I think for me, like literally, it's it's funny. When I was sort of recovering from bipolar instability, I made a deal with my therapist, and he said, you're not allowed to consider suicide as an option anymore. You're just not. Like, it's off the table. So if it's off the table, you got to figure out something else. You got to figure another way out of the moment. You got to figure another way to be. You got to imagine something, next month, a year down the road, that's going to offer you some huge, right, or some joy. Mm-hmm. And I think for me anyway, when I don't allow myself anymore to give in to, I feel despair, but I don't stay there, right? Mm-hmm. And so what are the other options, right? If I can't just sit, lay in my bed with the covers over going, oh my God, like this is it. And I have those moments when I wake up in the middle of the night, right, clutched with anxiety and fear. And they happen a lot. Mm-hmm. But then, all right, I can get the fuck out of bed and I got to do something today, right? To sort of get past that inertia of giving into that despair, right? So that's what I do.
That's pragmatism and hope. What about you, Marianne?
Well, I live near the ocean, so that's my solace. My absolute solace is salt water. It really cures me. But this summer, it was very on brand for 2020. It rained all of June, and then there were giant lion's mane jellyfish, which have never invaded our shores before, that looked like, I hope I don't offend anyone, giant menstrual clots with tentacles hanging from them that sting, so you couldn't swim.
Oh, lovely.
It was seriously curtailed. So I'm supposed to be doing Tai Chi, but I'm not. Instead, I just, I'm furious at all times. It's not good. Yeah. It's really not good. But I wanted to read a little snippet of something. I see someone just wrote, my aunt is pro-Trump and Catholic. That's fascinating to hear about the Catholic Church and fascism. I want to tell you, I know you should buy Fury, but I'm also reading this incredible book called A House in the Mountains. And it's about the women who liberated Italy from fascism, because the resistance women were unbelievable in Italy. And anyway, I wanted to read to you, encouraged by the Vatican, which launched a crusade for purity, the fascists decreed in a deluge of orders, speeches, radio programs, and articles that women could own nothing and decide nothing. Year by year, they were forced to sit by and face exclusion from teaching literature or philosophy, from being head teachers or senior civil servants. If they wanted to go to university, they had to pay double fees. That's what the Catholic Church did. They sided immediately with the fascists.
Wow.
So this is a fascinating book. It's only ramping up my anger, but
yeah, it's ramping up mine too. Just hearing that and my fear, and oh, good. And there's a link to A House in the Mountains through Charis right there. So that's excellent. Yeah. And also to Soulnet and also to Fury, of course. For me, pragmatism and hope is that, I mean, some days I have just terrible days. I'm just like, this is never going to be over.
Right.
And at the beginning of this, I was sort of like, am I afraid for my democracy or am I afraid for my health? Some days was democracy, some days with health. And it was like, pick one, Now I think pragmatism is, I am doing everything I can in terms of, I am volunteering with the Democratic Party of Georgia. I am talking to my students about voting. I am donating through various organizations to blue candidates all over the country, Senate, from the Senate on up. And that's pragmatism. And I watch some news and I go for hope. And I go for, how the numbers are showing us. And then I'm also thinking that, I'm thinking back to the civil rights movement, and I'm thinking back to Fannie Lou Hamer, and I'm thinking back to the Mississippi Freedom Party. And I'm thinking back to, and granted, I mean, I was like 5, okay? I learned about it later. And I'm thinking about the fact that change didn't happen right away. It is a long game. And so that goes into the self-care. And when Biden is elected.
I like that positivity.
Yeah. What we have is potentially an administration that will be open to change, that will listen to us. So it's not going to be a switch flipped, right away.
Because the Supreme Court is already going to be lost to us.
Right.
And that's really scary.
Yeah, that's very, very scary. So my next fight, of course, is Roe.
Yes.
My next fight is Roe, and I am post-reproductive age, but that doesn't mean that I don't care about people who
young girls.
And as well as healthcare, because Planned Parenthood provides healthcare for people across the gender spectrum. It's not just women, and it's not just abortions. So get me through November, and then I'm going into the Planned Parenthood fight. So let's see. Do we have any more questions?
And I think what you just said too, like get me through November, and then there's the Planned Parenthood fight. There has to be an acknowledgement that this. It's not like it's going to end, right? We're not going. There's always going to be something else that we have to keep reaching for. And I am a member of 12-step groups, and one of my favorite sort of mantras that I hold on to is just do the next right thing. Just that's all you have to do is just the next right thing, like not 100 right things, just the next right thing. And there's moments when it can feel overwhelming, right? It's just one thing you have to do, and then there's
that.
Yeah, isn't it? It
just
allows you to breathe in the middle of your fury and anxiety. Right?
Yeah. So what we need to do, all of us, is the next right thing, step by step. So with that, I think, is there another question? Let's see. Wait, top 2. I don't know how to do this. Do you have advice for folks? I really don't. What's going to be sad is when we do go back face to face in the classroom, I'm going to be like, but I got so good at Zoom and Crowdcast. Does the fury get or feel different for you the older you get, or do you just get better at handling the bullshit? Hi, Melanie. Sorry. You just get better at handling the bullshit. I just turned 61, and I feel like I'm getting better at handling the bullshit. But I don't know. What do y'all think?
I don't know. I'm still having meltdowns, and I'm older than you are. I mean, I sent you a screed that I wrote about my neighbor across the street. We're in a blue state, you know. The area I live in is nothing but Biden-Harris signs. Suddenly a Trump
Except
sign
for that
goes
one.
up across
Yeah.
the street.
I had this meltdown in the car a couple of weeks ago because I couldn't, like, I bought a grill and I couldn't get it out of my car. I got it into the car. They loaded it into the car, but I couldn't get it out. And I was just like, it was one of those days. It was like a Trump day, like awful day. And I was like cursing and crying. And my son, who's 14, he just said, Mom, step away from the car, take a deep breath, come back, and we'll look at the directions again on how to like take a part off and slide it out of the car. You know, like that kind of his rational brain kicked in where my like brain, you know, was taking over.
Yeah.
And so like trying to listen to that rational brain sometimes.
It's what my mom said, crying because the houseplants need watering. Somebody else says, do you have advice for folks in the interim between when we vote and when we know who the next president will be? What's our advice for the interim period between voting and knowing who the next president will be? It's a very good question because, you know, I grew up in a period where basically it was called that night or the next morning.
The next morning.
Yeah.
You don't think it's going to be, though? I mean,
that goes back to the pragmatism and hope thing. Sometimes I feel like we're going to know the next morning because if we get a landslide, I mean,
if we get a landslide, which is what I'm hoping
the current
for,
occupant of the White House is still going to have a tantrum, but it's not going to necessarily go to the Supreme Court. But
I think he already knows it's happening because, you know, I think he does. I don't know. There's all kinds of wild theories like that he'll be on a plane heading to Moscow the night before, but I don't really know. I don't know how I'm going. I hadn't thought of that, and that's a good thing to think about.
Yeah.
What
do. I mean, I just imagine myself glued to the television, you know, or glued to NPR, or glued to Twitter for weeks, and that is not good in any way.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
So what do y'all think? What is advice between November 3rd and whenever?
Carrie?
You've had more therapy than me.
I don't know.
I've obviously needed
Oh my
it.
gosh. You know, it was funny. I was actually in Ireland when the reproductive freedom amendment was passed, right? They were voting. Yeah, they were voting. And, you know, everybody was like waiting the next day as they were counting up the different counties, you know, the votes. And just one of the things that was sort of quite lovely about that experience was, you know, people who were polarized, and this was around reproductive freedom, right? Abortion in Ireland, which was
in a Catholic country. Yeah.
A priest-ridden country, according to Joyce.
Yeah.
No longer, though.
Yeah.
But people were still like, they're still kind to each other. There wasn't that like, you know, and maybe it's because you can't carry guns in Ireland, right? I mean, I'm a little afraid living where I live, where, you know, people carry a lot of guns. They own a lot of guns.
Yeah.
People get angry when you tell them to put a mask on. You know, that interim is going to be fairly fraught here.
Yes.
And I'm trying not to give into that fear. You know,
Yeah.
I'm trying not to give into that fear.
Yeah. I feel like I'm with Marianne right now. On a good day, I feel like we're going to know, you know, Wednesday. But we may not. And the other thing is that, you know, the question also has to do
I think it'll be that long.
Like the next day?
All I know is astrologically we're in Mercury retrograde right now, and it goes direct on the 3rd.
Dude, all right. And then, of course, there's a transition issue.
I'm searching for any hope I can get.
I will take that hope, man. I will take that hope.
All information is helpful.
All of it is helpful.
And Ireland is hopeful. Ireland is really hopeful.
Yeah.
I mean, they've gone from a priest-ridden country to they have a gay prime minister. They
Marriage Equality Act.
The Magdalene laundries only closed in the 90s. So they've come a long way. If they can do it, we can do it.
Well, and you know, condoms were only legal in the 90s in Ireland. And when I was there, and any like your sort of basic underwear shop on Main Street now has a whole back wall full of BDSM sex supplies. You know, where grannies are shopping for their undies, you can also get, you know,
for their granny panties.
Yeah.
I haven't been there in 45 years where I hitchhiked all over Ireland.
It's a beautiful place. This has been so enlightening and so nice to see both of you and the little people who come up in words on the right-hand side of my screen. That's the thing, is by the end of the day, I think the political activism, I'm so worn out. I say things like the little people on my screen. It's just,
Person, woman, man, camera, TV.
But
I feel like you just do what you can do within your skill set, and then you will feel like you've done enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? For me, it's like writing Rageaholic op-eds, some of which get printed and some of which don't. And, you know, my husband's an actor, so he does like, he gets asked to do like a lot of charity things, or like a lot of like, thank you workers, frontline workers, that kind of stuff. And we do it, whatever we are asked to do.
And that has great value. That has great value. So what we do now is we vote, and we get our Democratic friends to vote. And if we have empathy, we engage in conversations with people who will respond to empathy.
Right.
And we support independent booksellers like our friends at Charis Books and
very much.
Who in this time, I live 3 miles from the bookstore. I haven't been there in 8 months. So yeah, that's sad. All right. I think ER's back.
Yeah.
Hi.
Well, you queued me up, so
there you go.
Thank you all so much. This was really lovely.
Thank you.
If folks want to purchase Fury after hearing these great readings, please just click that teal button at the bottom of your screen. And I do want to let folks know that we're doing pop-ups at the store every Saturday. So if you miss seeing us in person and you want to come hang out tomorrow from 12 to 4 p.m., we're going to be doing a pop-up centered around cookbooks and food justice. So we'll be selling lots of other books too, and we're happy to run into the store to get anything on your list. But specifically, the theme is cookbooks and food justice to prepare you for the fall and winter holidays. So come see us. And until next time, I'm very grateful to all of you for this wonderful night, and I hope that we'll have lots to celebrate in the coming weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. I appreciate it.
Meet you all.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.